Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Jane, your favorite teacher and favorite psychologist. And welcome to our channel. The channel is called You're Not Grown at 18. And one of the concepts I wanted to talk about in this idea of You're Not Grown at 18 is Erickson's stages of development. And I like Erickson's stages of development because then it is the only theory, developmental theory, that takes us from birth to death. And if we don't hit certain milestones, then, we can make a projection in terms of the outcome. So I like Erickson's theory for that reason. So in Erickson's theory, we're going to go through all of the stages and kind of talk about how we see those outcomes in our lives or in the lives of people around us. So, this is a psychosocial developmental theory, and Erickson's first stage is infancy, which is from birth to 18 months. And the conflict that the individual experiencing is that at that point is trust versus mistrust. Important events that happen here is feeding. And the child is asking themselves, can I trust you? Can I trust you to give me the basic needs of feeding me, clothing me, shelter me? And this is the question that the child is asking of the caregiver, and whether that caregiver is a parent, a guardian, whatever. Can I trust you? And that trust really comes in basic things as feeding, shelter, and so forth. The outcome for that, children develop a sense of trust with caregivers who provide reliability, care, and affection. Lack of this would lead to mistrust. And we see this in young people where, especially if there was some trauma earlier in their lives or they were not properly cared for, properly provided for, um, they look at life in a way of not really trusting people, not really see people as reliable because the people who were supposed to take care of them did not take care of them. The second one is early childhood. This is from 2 to 3 years old. Autonomy versus doubt and shame. And the big deal here is potty training, toilet training. Children need to develop a sense of personal control over their physical skills and a sense of independence. Success leads to feeling of autonomy, whereas failure results in feeling of shame and doubt. Did we make this particular skill and meet this particular skill? It is essential that the child is confident and that the child is taught various skills, right? If you have young children and you're potty training them, you will notice that sometimes they feel embarrassed when they wet the bed or something like that. And so this again is an important milestone for the young child to move across. The next one is initiative versus guilt. And we see this in preschoolers 3 to 5 years old. And at this point, the child is exploring. Exploration needs to begin, and they are trying to assert control and power over their environment. In successful outcome, we see this leads to a sense of purpose. Children who try to exert too much power experience disapproval, resulting in a sense of guilt. So, how is the child exploring their environment? Are they given the latitude to explore their environment? And if they make mistakes, How is that child corrected, right? And these are important ways in which the parent navigate with their child, right? The next stage is school age, and this is from 6 to 11, industry versus inferiority. And now the child is at school. Children need to cope with the new social and academic demands. Success leads to a sense of competence, whereas failure results in that feeling of inferiority. Now, this is where if the child doesn't hit those designated milestones, we can see where sometimes they lack the drive, or the drive to do well or to do better does not kick in, because then they are moving in their lives with a sense of inferiority, which is not good, because then that impacts all areas of a person's life. The next stage is adolescence. And this is 12 to 18 years old. And this is identity versus role confusion. And we see this in social relationships. Teens need to develop a sense of self and personal identity. Success leads to the ability of an individual to stay true to themselves, while failure leads to role confusion and a weak sense of self. And this is where you see the individual, just having difficulty trying to figure out who they are. And so the surrounding environment have to be one that grounds them in who they are and grounds them in their identity. Then we have young adulthood. Erickson have this stage from 19 to 40. I think that's long, but let's go with it. Intimacy versus isolation. And this is in relationships. Young adults need to form intimate relationships, loving relationships with other people. Success leads to strong relationships, whereas failure leads to loneliness and isolation. Can they form intimate relationships? What does that look like? And as you notice, this theory, they're building on each other from one stage to the next to the next. And so it is essential that as we are raising children, and as parents raise children, that the child passes through those, various milestones. The next big one is from 40 to 65, middle adulthood. Um, and this is generativity versus stagnation. The big hallmarks here for this particular stage is work and parenthood. Parent need to create, not parents, sorry, adults need to create or nurture things that will outlast them, often by having children or by creating positive change that benefits other people. Success leads to the feeling of usefulness and accomplishment, whereas failure results in shallow involvement in their world. Having something to outlast them and this sense of accomplishment is important for a human being, because then it makes their life seems like it was worth living. And the decisions they have made, it was good, because now between 40 and 65, we are seeing the outcomes of those decisions, right? What decisions did you make in your 20s, in your 30s? By the time a person hits 40, those decisions are beginning to bear fruit. And now the individual can now begin to see the fruit of those decisions, whether they were good fruit or they were bad fruit. They were good decisions that created good outcomes, or if they were bad decisions that created poor outcomes for the individual, right? And so our next stage is maturity. This is 65 to death, 65 years old to death. And the conflict here is ego identity versus despair. And this is the point where a person begins to reflect on their lives or continue to reflect on their lives. Older adults need to look back on their life and feel a sense of fulfillment. Success at this stage leads to the feeling of wisdom, while failure results in regret, bitterness, and despair. And I want you to think about your life and think about the time frame that we live, right? So let's say we do certain things in our 20s, certain things in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, and so forth. When in that time, 20s, 30s, the person have the strength and the person have this idea that they have all the time in the world. Well, we do not have infinite time. Our time as we are living our lives is finite. It is not infinite. And so as we decide how we're going to spend and invest that time, knowing that it is finite, knowing that our strength and our energy is finite. And so at this stage, this is where you see some of the adults, as we meet them and we encounter them and we ask ourselves, oh my, why are they so bitter? They became bitter because then they regret the consequences of their choices and the outcomes of their decision. But now at 65, 70, the youth of the strength the person had in their youth, that's gone. It's not there anymore. Time is no longer on the person's side. And so they may want to go back, but they can't because now they have more days behind them than they do ahead of them. And so as you are making decisions with regards to your lives, I want you guys to really think about time and this construct of time, right? And that we have to live our lives in certain seasons. And so understanding that we are not grown at 18. Whatever those decisions that we make, they must be good ones. And it's not to say that we're always going to get it right. We're not. We always make mistakes, right? But the intent of this channel is for young people and parents to get some insight into what is happening within the child, and the various stages of development and brain development. That's one piece. The other piece is for the number of mistakes that a young person may make to reduce the number of those mistakes. That's one. Two, but also minimize the impact of those mistakes on a person's lives. Because there are some mistakes that are long term, that are lifelong, that an individual never recover from. And so I want you guys to think about the stages of development. Look around your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, and make sense and make meaning of their experiences. Talk to them. Allow them to talk to you and be present to listen as they share their experiences and as they share their wisdom with you. Again, this is Dr. Jane. I'm your favorite teacher. I'm your favorite psychologist. And welcome to our channel. If you like this content, please subscribe to our channel. And the channel is called You're Not Grown at 18.